Hello, listeners and readers of AwardsWatch.com. This is the AwardsWatch Podcast, episode 192. Not a regular episode released on Monday, but we are releasing this midweek. We're doing a special episode over the films and legacy and filmography of one Christopher Nolan. I'm your executive editor, Ryan McQuade. Joining me today is our editor-in-chief, Erik Anderson.
And just so you know, this is not a part of Director Watch. This is a standalone episode because Ryan loves Christopher Nolan.
I want it put on the record that this was Erik's idea to do this.
I don't believe that's true. I was not there when
our guest today can confirm that. He is
damn it.
He is the editor and operator of FilmSpeak. He is a great friend of both Erik's and mine, and he is one of the biggest Christopher Nolan fans I know out there. And it is one Griffin Schiller. Griffin, welcome to the Awards Watch Podcast.
Hello. Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm stoked to be here, especially if we're going to be talking about Nolan. I mean, that man is my deity. So that's.
There we go.
I'm going to disappoint you. I'm so sorry, Griffin.
You can't. The blinders are already on. The blinders are on.
See, Erik tried to push Nolan all on me, and then Griffin just took it all the weight right off of me. So that's perfectly fine. Yeah. We're going to talk a lot about I think the biggest director working today. I think that's a fair assessment to say. Maybe Erik or Griffin will disagree with me. Who knows? Maybe they'll agree with me. We're going to talk a lot about what we like about his films, his flaws. If he lives up to that title I just said, his influences on cinema. We'll talk about some of our favorite moments in his films. We'll do a Nolan ranking, and then we'll give out some expectations we have for his latest film, Oppenheimer, that is releasing next week in theaters. But Griffin, yes, I got to ask you, buddy. You called him a deity, which is that's high praise. So I'm curious from your perspective. Let's take out the God level stuff, and let's just ask a simple question. What was your first experience with Christopher Nolan films, and what about his films speak to you? What's your relationship with him as a director, and what's your relationship with his films?
I think for me, the first Nolan film I saw was Batman Begins in theaters, and that was with my dad, and that was a really formative memory for me. Just not just because I went with my dad or whatever. I mean, it was weird because it was my dad and I never really went to movies together. It was always a family affair, but I guess he just really wanted to see the new Batman, and I was down to go see it. So I just have vivid memories of seeing that movie. And then I don't know, it was, I think it was a subconscious thing. It was after seeing that and just having my mind blown and appreciating the character of Batman in a new way, really just latching on to the cinematography, the music, the pacing, his non-linear editing. There was just I've just found myself really drawn to his films, and I rewatched Batman Begins more times than I can remember. And then The Dark Knight comes out, that really just blows my mind. And so I think a lot of my attachment to Christopher Nolan comes from him being the guy that informed my love of cinema. I mean, obviously I was watching a lot of Spielberg films growing up. Raiders was big. I was a big Star Wars fan too, and just the typical movie franchises and Bond and whatnot. But his movies were the first movies that I latched onto and was oh, there's something more here. This is actual arts that I can kind of look at and digest and interpret and just I don't know. It's that. And then I also, what I really love about him is he's a very senses based filmmaker. He really plays into just raw emotion and feeling more so than I think any. I mean, you can argue other filmmakers do that, but I think that's just kind of his thing. That he leads with emotion. He constructs his scenes around these big sweeping moments. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I think he is the best filmmaker at ending a movie, because he knows how to tie up all these threads and edit them all together in a way that just like leaves you feeling satisfied. And it's, you know, whether it's working with Hans Zimmer or Ludwig Göransson, there's like his attention to detail when it comes to score and edit and spectacle. It's an all around sensory experience. And I don't know. And then I just like think the concepts that he's interested in exploring. I mean, obviously, you know, time is like, I mean, every Christopher Nolan movie is about time, but more than that, the people that he's drawn to, I like that he kind of paints in broad strokes, because I think it allows the audience to interpret his work in a multitude of ways. Sometimes for the worse, because as we've started to see online, there's a lot of people that are like, oh, Christopher Nolan was like pro-Patriot Act and like anti, you know, the Occupy Wall Street and stuff like that from like his Dark Knight movies. And it's like, oh, I don't know if he's really doing that. But yeah, there's just like, he's just one of those filmmakers that it's like when you watch one of his movies, you're just like, fuck, how, like this guy, the concepts, the way that he makes them feel accessible, the cinema of it all. It's just, I don't know. There's just something really beautiful that I've always been drawn to him about. It's, yeah, I don't know. And it probably stems from the fact that, you know, growing up, just kind of being exposed to those movies. But yeah.
Well, no, that's a great answer. Erik, this was your idea to do this episode, so you must be a giant Christopher Nolan fan. Must have been there opening night for Following. You know what I mean? And I'm just kidding. Nobody was there opening night for Following.
No,
you were, Ryan. You were there.
No, Erik was, because he's been at every film.
Almost.
Yeah.
Pretty close.
Damn.
But Erik, I'm curious. I mean, your relationship with Christopher Nolan as a director. I actually, like, I know we kind of joke back and forth about Nolan, and you joke with me because, you know, I like
because it's easy, and I like to poke the bear.
Yeah, he likes to make fun of me, but yeah, you know,
yeah.
None of our listeners have ever figured that out.
I know.
But I am curious, though, sincerely, about your thoughts on Nolan as a director and what you think of him in his films.
I love looking at his lineup and looking at the trajectory of his career, because in a lot of ways it fits in with how a lot of directors are. They have a tiny independent film that nobody watches, but it gets revisited because of everything else. And then they do have an indie breakthrough that gets a lot of attention. And then that pretty quickly catapults them to kind of one of two directions, which still is pretty true today. And that's that they either get like an English language remake of a foreign film, or they get a superhero movie. And he did both in that order. But yeah, my introduction to him was Memento in 2000. And that was at the height of my video store days, working at a video store. So it was prime bait for
a video store?
People like us. Yeah, I worked at a video store for years.
What's a video store?
You shut up. We had VHS, everything. My God.
Betamax.
But my actual draw to Memento wasn't Nolan, because nobody knew who he was at the time. It was Guy Pearce, who was coming off of LA Confidential and Priscilla Queen of the Desert. So that was the draw, and it was an interesting way to discover Nolan, because it was certainly from, I mean, essentially a back door. And once you got through that movie and just the puzzle that it is, you know, it gave you the opportunity to go, wow, who is this person? Who is thinking of this in this way, and what are they going to do next? And I love Memento. I think it is tremendous. I didn't see following until later. And I usually, from the benefit of my age, watch things in order. So I don't, my first experience with a director that has 15 or 20 films isn't their 10th film, it's their first film. And so I have had that luxury of being able to watch things in that order and watch a progression that's also based on the time and the moment that things are released and what's happening. So it was really funny when he went from Memento to Insomnia, which was pretty textbook, pretty blueprint for how Hollywood treats and wants to give voice to independent directors. And it's good, it's fine. Didn't knock me out. But then Batman Begins did something that completely revived a genre that had been pretty mocked, and rightfully so, because there were really no good superhero movies since like the original Superman in 1978 and Superman 2. It never took off the way that I think that everybody was kind of hoping that it would at the time. And he just did something that, not that I'm, a comic book fan or like that really of any measure, but he certainly wanted to examine underbellies and darkness in a way that we see in things like from David Lynch and from other directors that are like, here's facades and here's reality, but kind of all of it was dark. And there wasn't really an underbelly. The underbelly was the belly. It was everything. And I really liked that. I really dug that. And he just kind of kept going through with little surprises. The Prestige, I think, has gotten a tremendous amount of love on rewatches because, again, many people didn't watch it in 2006. All of the Dark Knight trilogy and everything else were their introductions, and then they kind of went backwards. So it's gotten a lot of very deserved attention. I do think some of his ideas get a little bit exhausted and a little bit snake eating its tail with Tenet and even Interstellar, which are not two of my not favorites. But at the same time, I haven't done enough rewatches, and they're both things, I think especially Interstellar, that I do need to rewatch because, sometimes it's been almost 10 years. Sometimes your feelings about something change because you're obviously a different person. But yes, overall, I am actually a very, very big fan because I think he is very specific in his vision and very deliberate. Not that his movies aren't able to have spontaneity, but everything feels kind of like you were saying, Griff, everything really feels like it's in its place.
Yeah.
And it is so specific.
Yeah.
Because his vision is.
Yeah. I also, real quick before I assume Ryan, you're going to chime in, but like he's also like he's managed, it's because of the Batman movies, really, but like because he did that trilogy, he is the only filmmaker that can sell a movie on his name alone. Like there is, we're even seeing now that Spielberg can't do that anymore. I genuinely think Christopher Nolan, maybe Jordan Peele, he's another one that
Peele.
I think, Peele's up there. Maybe Greta Gerwig will be up there after Barbie, but I think Barbie is kind of overshadowing her more so. But like outside of those, possible people, Christopher Nolan is like, that is the draw. It doesn't matter what he's making. And the fact that you can get people in like fucking high school excited to go watch a 3-hour adult drama biopic about the creation of the atomic bomb is insane. Like my girlfriend is like she like asks like kids in her classes like what movies are you excited about coming out this week, and like almost every single one of them is saying Oppenheimer, and I just like that is nuts to me. Like just that he has that power over an audience, and that it hasn't really stopped ever since The Dark Knight.
Yeah. I hate him. No, I'm just kidding. No,
the truth will always reveal itself.
Finally
right?
out. No, I'm like Griffin. I remember seeing Batman Begins in theaters. I think I saw Insomnia first at home, which once again, my parents, they just let me watch whatever they want. It really was just I think it was because it was Pacino and it was Robin Williams, and so you get to and Hilary Swank, and so it was like, oh, you get to watch like this, just kind of like this crime movie or whatever, and it's not too bad, besides like some language or whatever. I didn't see Memento till I was like in high school, and I thought it was, as I still think it is today, a very fine movie, and it's fine. And that's my story. I'm sticking to it. I think though, like, the thing about Nolan in following is what it is. It's like it's your first kind of feature, and it's laying the bones down for, I think, what he carries out better in other films. And then, I mean, I know that some people online might not think that following exists, but it does. But it reminds me a lot of, like, as we're talking right now on Director Watch, we're talking about we're coming up on talking about Todd Haynes. And he, before he has Safe, he has Poison. And that's a movie that's very experimental and very different from the rest of his filmography. But there's so much stuff in that film that just kind of bleeds through the rest of what is to come. And Memento is definitely that, because, the nonlinear structure and, being inspired by, obviously, like a movie like Pulp Fiction, or being, inspired by, Erik, you talked about these underbellies. I mean, Michael Mann is just runs rampant through his filmography. That's one of his big people of inspiration. And his sense of scale is somebody of that of like David Lean too, where David Lean had these massive films. We're talking about Bridge on the River Kwai, or Lawrence of Arabia, or Dr. Zhivago, Passage to India, all these big movies. And yet the thing that drives those forwards, besides the wonderful cinematography and the action pieces and everything, is the human connectivity, and the, especially with like Lawrence of Arabia, the cutting back and forth, different eras of time and whatnot. So, and also he's a massive fan of Kubrick, so you can see a lot of his influences. He is the harbinger of cinema for his generation. He is the one stomping his foot down and using film projection and using 70 millimeter and 35 millimeter to champion it through, to make sure that it doesn't die. He's a lot of people talk about Spielberg and PTA and Scorsese, but he's right there with them in terms of film preservation and making sure the history of this art form continues on in an era in which it is continuously getting less and less. The movies of the past, movies that they grew up on and admired, are going away. So I very much appreciate that about him. I think that his movies are really great. I think he's getting, for me at least, the further he got away from The Dark Knight, and kind of has just now had his blank checks since Dark Knight Rises, he's made some really interesting choices. He doesn't try to repeat himself. I think, at least in terms of the stories he's trying to do, I think he's trying to do different things, maybe with the same, kind of constructs, like time, right? Or damaged people, or, I mean, like, you look at something like Oppenheimer that's coming out. A movie like that exists because I think of like the last three movies. It's almost an amalgamation of things with when you're talking about, the world on the brink of extinction, and that's Interstellar. And you look at it, it's literally set during World War II, just like Dunkirk. And then nuclear Annihilation is something that is at the forefront in the threat inside of something like Tenet. So it's natural progressions and it makes sense in that he kind of leads up to it. I think though, you know, he gets great performances out of actors too. I think that he is, a lot of actors talk about just how really easy it is to work with him. And I was listening to a conversation with Emily Blunt and Matt Damon and Robert Downey Jr. on the press tour for Oppenheimer. And Emily Blunt's like, everybody wants the call. Everybody wants the call to be in a Christopher Nolan movie. It's like the minute you can get that script. They were talking about how Matt Damon lives in the same building as Emily Blunt, and they were going up for roles, and he went to see Matt, but he was also going to go see Emily, but he didn't want to feel like, she's like, I don't want him to give me the job out of convenience, but he was like, no, I really wanted to give her the job, and there's a level of excitement, but he also has his regulars like a Cillian Murphy, like a Michael Caine, like a Christian Bale, like a Gary Oldman, that are tremendous. I think of like, there's some actors that like McConaughey. I think his performance in Interstellar is one of the strongest, if not the strongest of his career. I think Hugh Jackman's performance in The Prestige is the best Hugh Jackman we've ever had. I think that, Bale's really great. It's a top 5 performance for him in The Prestige 2. I mean, I dare I say he's also able to like bring in like actors that we kind of forgot about, or actors he grew up like Matthew Modine or Eric Roberts, or even bring out David Bowie out of like kind of retirement and doing a couple scenes in The Prestige, or even working with like Brana in Tenet and saying, go wild with this, I don't care. He does have his flaws. I mean, his female characters are very limited, and I feel like, but I feel like that is a lot of great directors, male directors. Like, I love Spike Lee to death, but Spike Lee is very limited when he comes to his female characters as well. People say that about Scorsese too. So it is a knock on a lot of male directors, and that's why, somebody like Greta Gerwig and other great female directors are necessary in the medium to be able to tell female stories, as well as just stories in general. But I think
Todd Haynes doesn't have that problem.
He doesn't have that problem. Okay,
Todd
maybe
Haynes is a great director of female stories and actresses.
Yeah. Well, okay. How about,
I wonder why. I don't know.
I was going to say straight, maybe, like go back to it. Straight male directors. How about that?
Must be a reason. I don't know.
But no, I think that I agree with Griffin. He organically built this check that he has now in being able to. Yes, he's doing a Batman movie, a couple Batman movies, and he's doing it off of the fact that like it was a gamble for him to even take Batman Begins, because he was not the first choice. It was the Wachowskis, and the Wachowskis were like, Warner Brothers was like, you could do the Matrix sequels or you could do Batman Begins. They chose the Matrix sequels, and that's shaped the kind of the way cinema history has been now. And those movies are great, and Batman Begins is great too. But then if they don't get it, does he make The Dark Knight? Does he make all the projects that he has? You'll never know. But when The Dark Knight comes out, he is part of a summer that shifted the tide of modern cinema, which is you had not only The Dark Knight come out, and a lot of superhero movies and a lot of movies in general and a lot of blockbusters in general wanted to lean into being dark and being gritty and being, so serious. It is also on the other side, in that same summer, you have the MCU come out, and it is the commodification of everything and having that giant franchise basically consume the rest of Hollywood. And now but there's no room in between anymore. And what's really interesting is that a lot of people have basically said like he's like Nolan is the king of cinema or whatever, or he's Is the savior of cinema. People
I
say
think
this
that
crap
was just
online.
you.
No,
I think
people-
you said
People
that.
say this stuff online. No, it's true.
You're
And they
always
do
like,
it to
people are saying this. And I'm like, it was you, Ryan.
no, Twitter dunks on this man and everything, but it's like I think that he does make movies with a level of sincerity and talks about him
God, yeah.
where he's not a pretentious person. I don't
No.
think of him as that. I think a lot of people want to point fingers at him. I think a lot of people have their knives ready to go for him. And I think a lot of and rightfully so. Like I think like some of the flaws that he has, I think also too pushing Tenet to release in 2020 was a little was very misguided at the time. And a lot of people were willing to dunk on him for sure. But I think also too, like I wish there were more of him. I wish that in this back half of his career, he would abdicate for more directors to get like that. And his comments about, Barbie and Greta and Jordan Peele have been very, great to hear about. I saw this article where he's saying like, I'm going to go see Barbie with my kids and Cillian Murphy was saying the same thing too. And so I hope that he kind of takes his power and kind of can give it over to son, because it feels like Griffin's saying, he's one of the very few people that have this ability to, when you can put the name from the visionary director and it actually means something for people. Yeah. You could maybe possibly transfer some of that over, because if he doesn't, then he might be one of the last dying breeds that you have of that for a long, long time. Because I think it is kind of crazy to, after a movie like Tenet that made money, but not like made all of its money back, to get $100 million movie that's a 3-hour R-rated movie in the middle of the summer about the atomic bomb. That's kind of nuts. Nobody's getting that unless it's like drenched in IP. You know what I mean? Or Indiana Jones. You know what I mean? And shit like that. So,
I think there's there's a couple things with that. It's like, one, Universal's like, oh, we get to be the home of Christopher Nolan now, which I mean, that's a pretty big feather in anyone's cap. Plus, they're also the home of Jordan Peele. So now they're like auteur city over there, basically. They're
what Warner Brothers used to be.
Yeah, I was literally about to say Universal is what WB was like 10 years ago or something like that. Which is very smart of them to do, but also like I mean they obviously recognize the awards potential for that, and so I think I mean, granted, I don't think any of us have seen Oppenheimer, but Cillian Murphy's probably going to be up for an Oscar. Nolan probably best director. There's you can see.
Not if Erik has anything to say about it.
Well, I'll leave the predictions to him.
Why did I do what?
He's been low. He's been low on Murphy already. So.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
I drop kick Murphy.
Right. That's good.
Yeah.
Anyway, we got to wrap up the show now.
But it's an investment, right? It's like I think like the movie will have very strong legs, especially because there's really nothing coming out in August, and I think most normies, cinephile online people, are generally more excited to go see something like Oppenheimer than Barbie. Plus, I generally
really?
I think so. Yeah, most it's. I mean, I don't know. I think like Barbie obviously has like the Gen Z appeal. There's like the cinephile appeal to that too. There's I don't know. I'm just going off of stuff that I've seen and like conversations that I've had, but I think the thing with Oppenheimer is that you're gonna get like the demographic of people that are gonna go see like Mission Impossible and Indiana Jones, like your parents and everything. But then you'll also get the cinephiles there, and I don't know. I will
also say you will get the TikTok crowds, because
yes.
The thing about Nolan too is while he does embrace old cinema, he seems to also weirdly be embracing audiences in trying to get newer and younger audiences to watch his movies. I know that sounds weird to say, and it feels really like dad coming out to like with the kids to the mall kind of vibe or whatever. But like when he did the Fortnite trailer drop for Tenet, and done, like he's been at the forefront of these, like drop the teaser or the opening scenes in IMAX. But no, and then also too, like I was watching the reveal of the 11-mile long film reel, right, for Oppenheimer, and where is it getting? It's not on like Good Morning America or the Times are running it. It's on some guy doing it off of TikTok with him having a conversation about that, and it's
I'd love to know how
he's
that
got
guy,
like his foot in both ways, and it works, for him, because that movie's tracking for a $50 million opening. That movie should not make $50 million on its opening weekend. Like if
50 is that new? Because it was like 40 to 43 like yesterday.
No, it's been like 40 to 50 to even like 55. I mean,
it feels like you're gilding the lily a little bit.
Oh, you mean how like Barbie, it's like, oh, it's gone from 60 to 85 to like $2 billion opening? Like, come on. Like,
no,
also
it's like a 90 to 100. So
I mean, if those people that don't go to Barbie
based on ticket sales.
I also think too, if the people don't go to Barbie, they're gonna also just I'll go to Oppenheimer. Like they'll totally do that.
That's true.
Like,
well, I mean, assuming there's tickets available.
Oh yeah, exactly. But I mean, like, it's both of those
You're
movies.
So funny.
It's not. I'm not funny. You're just thinking that I'm like trying to like be out here to make sure that Oppenheimer is going to be a box office hit, and you're just wanting it to be a bomb. But I mean,
I'm not wanting it to be a bomb. There is a bomb. Yeah. I think everyone's really going to be going to see Cillian Murphy hang dong. That's what they want. That's what the people want.
Yeah, but
in 70 millimeter IMAX.
That's going to be like a 30-foot cock. That is going to be amazing.
I guarantee you it is probably not that bad, because I've already seen some people that have seen it saying it's not that bad. Like the rating is a little bit ridiculous. Which
I thought you were talking about his dick.
No, I was not talking about.
Like, that's a weird thing to say.
Yeah, they'll get a penis. They'll get a little Peaky Blinder. You know what I mean? And anyway, but Erik, I do want to circle back to the question I had at the top of this for you, which is, do you think he is the biggest director that we have working today? Do you think I'm not talking about the best. There's a difference between being the best.
I know, but even using a word like biggest is completely, it's a debatable word.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I asked you. Do you think
he's okay? In terms of biggest, he's the seventh highest grossing director. So no, he's not the biggest. Mm-hmm. Is he the biggest in terms of a lot of what you were just talking about who can create a movie and sell a movie on name? He is probably that person right now. James Cameron, obviously, but James Cameron goes 10 years between movies.
Yeah.
But he's sort of somewhere in between James Cameron and Steven Spielberg, old school Steven Spielberg, where effects were practical. And if there were CGI or visual effects, you couldn't really tell, or they were just things that were impossible to do, but only augmented and did not become a scene. And that's one of, I think, his greatest successes in anything that he has done, is that he is making these extremely large scope films and doing them practically, whether it's a car chase or explosions or destroying whole sections of cities or whatever it is. There are stakes that feel real and tangible in a way that they will never feel in an Avengers movie or anything like that. And I think there is a benefit to that, to an audience, to even executives who are really just soulless penny pinchers. But also too, $100 million for Oppenheimer seems pretty low. It's that in this era, in this day and age, spending $100 million on a movie that is going to be a summer tentpole is a bargain. He could probably get $200 million. I think what he does, and one of the reasons why he is successful, is that he is also economical with his choices. Even though shooting on film is risky and expensive, because you can't just look into your immediate dailies of what you just shot. It is old school and it's super risky, but I feel like he is extremely economical in his choices, and I think that makes him, yeah, among the names that can bring audiences in and get movies made purely on that reputation, and he's kept that reputation. Do I wish sometimes he would do something more like The Prestige or Memento? Yes, absolutely. It would be really, really neat. But he has a clear vision for himself, and it's not for me to say, "Oh, Christopher Nolan, I really wish he would make Memento again." Who the fuck does it? What does it matter what I think about that? It doesn't matter.
Well, I think
it only matters what he feels his path is.
Yeah.
But I do feel though, and when you and I have talked about this, and Griffin, maybe you could speak to it too, but I feel like Oppenheimer and Dunkirk, while they are bigger films in terms of budget, the heart of a Memento and the heart of a Prestige, like the stripping it down, not having so much effects. Yes, you're able to make a movie on a bigger budget, but it still has the feeling of those still smaller scale films. It's not a giant piece of IP. It's not a movie set in space. It's not a dream within a dream within a dream. It's not a temporal pincer movement. You know what I mean? It's 3 little stories in an hour and 40 minutes that all tie together. It's a 3-hour epic, yes, but it's about a person's life, and it's really set around one set piece. I think that like Oppenheimer is the closest we'll probably get to him back to the Prestige level, where it's about character driving.
I feel like that too.
Yeah,
I feel like that too.
Yeah,
and that's why I'm excited for it, because it does feel very different than what we've gotten from him, and getting away from science fiction and fantasy and creating something that's more grounded. Not that it has to be, but
that's where he gets a little trapped too. I think is when he's trying to explain, and then people complain about the dialogue, and then he makes the movie, and then he makes the movie. He's like, you know what? Don't think about anything, just feel it. And then everybody's like, well, now no one's explaiing it to me. And it's like, well, shit, you can't have it both ways. You know what I mean? It's like,
For the record, they do explain it.
Yeah, they do. And God, it rules.
No, but I agree. I feel like Oppenheimer is that middle ground where it's still maximalist filmmaking. It's still massive scale. Everything is done with, the largeness of the 70 millimeter, IMAX film stock, whatever. But yeah, it kind of feels like it's borrowing from like the more character focus, the character study stuff from his previous films. I mean, he's even like, just listening to him talk on the press tour, he has drawn comparisons between this movie and something like Memento, playing with POV and stuff like that. Like, I think he said the everything in color is the subjective from Oppenheimer's experience versus the black and white, which is from Robert Downey Jr.'s character's perspective. So you're getting like the subjective with a little bit more of an objective, and yeah, I don't. It definitely feels like they're playing into a bit of the David Lean style protagonist in this film for sure. Especially just, I just like saw Lawrence of Arabia for the first time, and like so much of that influence in Nolan's work, I think really stood out to me, specifically the really morally complex, almost enigma-like protagonists. And I think definitely in a film like Oppenheimer, when you're dealing with someone who is responsible with, unleashing this power onto the world, and then like the moral implications of it, like that's a really interesting thing. And knowing Nolan and the way he chooses to like end a lot of these kind of morally ambiguous stories outside of his Batman films, I don't know if we'll get an answer as to what he thinks is right or wrong But I kind of like that. I kind of just like him presenting the information and then just sort of being like, this is heavy. This is,
Yeah.
make of it up as you will. Yeah. Yeah.
I like that.
Well, I think that's why that conversation about, the Patriot Act and all that stuff is a little silly, because I do also think that he is a very responsible filmmaker.
Yes.
At the same time that he is presenting problematic people and situations. So he's not flippant at all with what he's doing, but the responses can be really flippant because people are media illiterate and stupid.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, if going back to the Patriot Act thing, that moment in The Dark Knight is not supposed to be viewed as a good thing. In fact, like, Lucius Fox.
I don't know how you can actually.
It's the entire inciting incident for all the shit that follows in the third movie.
Yeah.
And that's like the big thing. And the noble lie, he's not advocating for a noble lie. He's saying, no, that shit's pretty bad, and you cause something worse to kind of come in and infiltrate. And it's
it goes back to what I was saying earlier about people online. I don't really know how to, like, they're looking for things to pull apart from so many of of great people. And it's because most people it's easier to be negative than it is to be positive, I think, in a lot of things in this world.
Yeah.
And I think that once a movie has been declared a masterpiece and declared the best movie of its genre, like The Dark Knight, when you make something like that, it's the best movie of its genre, people are going to want to pick it apart. And that's fair if you want to do that. But then also, when you start hearing these people say stupid shit like that, then it's like, okay, you're losing a lot of value here. And you're also taking away from any emotional connection to the characters, what it means to the story. I mean, I personally like Dark Knight Rises. Griffin, I know you really love that movie. That movie to me is like the biggest, like, I understand what you're trying to do here. I forgive you. I understand you didn't maybe even really want to do this, or because of losing Ledger and everything, like, which was such a big moment, by the way, too. And we can talk about that legacy, because I mean, The Dark Knight's legacy is even grander than just its filmmaker. It's a movie that changed the entire industry, not just even from the movies that are getting made. I mean, Erik, it changed the Oscar game that we play in. I mean, the expanded lineup is a result of this movie not getting in Wall-E, not getting into a Best Picture lineup that was shit, and being a movie that had critics. It was the perfect, like, what they talk about now of like movies that fit right in the middle, right, where the consumer and the critic and everybody in the industry really love it, and it gets nominated for like 5-6 Oscars, and it wins a couple. And we're talking about Ledger's performance all year, and it was the movie of its year. And yet,
well, yes, that is absolutely the movie that jump started that and kickstarted that. And I love looking and reading what other directors think about Nolan. And I think maybe my favorite thing, which sort of encapsulates what happened with The Dark Knight and Oscars and all that, was Nicholas Roeg saying, people talk about commercial art and the term is usually self-negating. Nolan works in the commercial arena, yet there's something very poetic about his work. I think that, I mean, directors really love him, but I think that's a really succinct way to describe him and his films, and how, I mean, if The Dark Knight was today, it would be an easy Best Picture nominee. And it is one of, if not the main reason that the expanded lineup exists.
Yeah. And then, I mean, from that point on, he's making every big movie possible. I mean, then the next movie is Inception, which is another $1 billion movie that gets in the lineup and would get in the lineup regardless of if there was an expanded lineup or not. It was such another movie of the moment. Like, I think I think the reason why I say, like, I think he is the biggest director is because his movies become the movies of their year, their movies of their moment, and people can't stop talking about them. Like, I love Big Jim more than anybody else now. I'm a big Jim guy. I don't know if you guys know this, but like, I don't think a lot of people like it outgrossed Top Gun Maverick, but Maverick was clearly more talked about by most people than Avatar, and there still is a lot of detractors ahead of it, and we won't see Big Jim now for like 15 more years. while Nolan, he's gonna have this movie come out, and I mean, he might, he's probably gonna make another one in a couple of years, and a couple of years after that, and it'll be different things on different levels and different scales. And whether the controversies are good or bad, he's always at the forefront of those conversations. And I you're right, Erik. I think back to 2017 when I think it was Santa Barbara Film Festival. They had the directors lineup, and they always get the directors that are nominated for Best Director at the Oscars, and it was Peele, Gerwig, Del Toro, PTA, and him. And that round table is one of the best round tables I've ever seen, because that's one of the best director lineups we've ever had. And the level in which they all were talking about each other's films, but then Paul Thomas Anderson who is a great filmmaker in his own right, was talking about Dunkirk, and he was talking about watching, and he goes at every like 5 minutes he go, well, how the fuck did he make that? Or how the fuck did he shoot it like that? And he kept saying it over and over again. And it just shows that someone like Paul Thomas Anderson, who's never going to touch a budget, like even like Oppenheimer's, like ever, as much as I would love him to, he's just never going to be like that, because that's not the type of director he is. He's just looking at his, fellow director, his friend. He's watching, and he's truly amazed that you can make a movie at that big a scale. And like you're saying, Erik, it's like how people felt when they watched Spielberg, or how they watched directors of that era, or even Cameron, or Ridley Scott is another person that made big movies a lot of the time during his era, but also went back to character dramas then too, So I don't think that, and I think that having them up on that stage, Peele and Gerwig being like right next to him, as I think like but passing the baton, or the people that are going to be next, because you hear Gerwig's comments in the New Yorker article saying, I want to be like Nolan. Peele essentially is making his movies, and their original horror movies with his name attached to them. And the minute you see, like, from the director Jordan Peele, and everybody wants to compare to Shyamalan, but he's building up his movies from like 5 million to 20 million to now like 50 to 100 million or whatever. Get out of this. His next movie will be $100 million movie. There's no question about it. And a lot of that now for modern directors is looking at, I think, Nolan and how he did it, and did it still within it being his movie and filling his voice, because you're working with Warner Brothers properties, and it's very, the biggest property they have in Batman, and you're still making your movies. It is the Dark Knight trilogy, but a lot of people call it the Nolan Batman movies, and everything else is DC. You know what I mean?
Well, and it's, he did that at a point in time where people didn't have the faith, not only in comic book movies, but in fucking Batman movies, because the last time they saw Batman, he was, whipping out bat credit cards, the bat nipples. Arnie was like Mr. Freeze. Like, it was so absurd.
Hey, that's a good movie.
Hey, it's fine. Whatever. It's a nice little toy advertisement, but like going from that to something, you're getting like an up and coming auteur to helm your fucking Batman movies, and you're like, it's wild. And I think Batman Begins and The Dark Knight Rises share more of the same DNA than The Dark Knight does.
Yeah.
So like, when you go from Batman Begins to something like The Dark Knight, it's just like, holy shit, man. Like, this is, I mean, you just kind of get swept up in it, and you're left speechless. You're like, wow, like this, like Batman Begins was really good, but like this is, I really hate the phrase transcending the genre, but it does, because it's dealing in just like morality in such an interesting way. And it's not about like these characters, but it's more about like these like pillars of storytelling and what they represent thematically, and he's using the comic book genre to do that. That's just so, I mean, it's brilliant. It really is brilliant. It's why that film and those movies, especially like The Dark Knight specifically, but those movies kind of still hold up. I think I know some people have tried to like knock it down because of the stupid fight choreography or whatever. I just like, if that's all you care about,
exactly,
like, dude, give me a break.
I mean, I'm glad that Nolan got in and out of this genre when he did, but at the same time, I also feel like he's semi-responsible for Warner Brothers thinking that they could take DC into a realm that look at where it is now and how absolute garbage it is.
Well, that's the question I was going to ask you both, is like, and then before we get into like some favorite moments and then get out of here, is his influence on cinema good, bad, or is it incomplete? Like, as of right now,
it's good and bad.
Is it both?
But the bad is not his fault.
No,
is it a misunderstood kind of like people just? Well, I wouldn't even say I wouldn't say like audiences. I was talking about studios misunderstanding.
Absolutely.
No, Erik.
Yes.
Erik.
Yeah, no, it's studios. It's not. Yeah,
it's not audiences.
I would say the misunderstanding comes from a studio head watching something like The Dark Knight and going like, oh, this worked because it was set in the real world. It was gritty. It was dark. We're dealing with like things that feel tangible, and we're getting rid of the iconography of these comic book characters. We're treating them as like people. And you go back and you watch that and you're like, I think you have a complete misunderstanding of those movies, because to me, those films are the closest we've gotten to the Richard Donner Superman movies. There is a very intense sense of optimism baked into those films. And I think if you're just looking at it aesthetically, like, I mean, yeah, they're like real world, they're dark. The Dark Knight specifically has like the feel, the Michael Mann sort of feel to it. But I think if you dig below the surface there is a lot of hope and optimism there, and he gets to the heart of this character in a way that I don't know if anyone else really has been able to since. I mean, we'll see. I think Matt Reeves, that's a completely different thing, but yeah, like, because everyone was chasing the Dark Knight thing. They were all like, "Oh, it's got to be dark, gritty, and realistic," and it's like, no. That's not. You're missing it. It's the way these movies were written. It was the care for the characters. It was allowing the filmmaker to bring to life their vision, and not tempering with it. I don't know. Nolan's one of those guys where it's like he's often imitated, hardly ever matched, if at all. So
I will say about Matt Reeves' take is that even though I really, really like the Batman, one of the great things about these three different takes on Batman, Tim Burton's and the Schumacher, that era, and Nolan's, is really how different they are. Burton's is his style, and Gotham feels like Metropolis from the 1920s, and obviously the goofy George Clooney era with the angles and zooms feel much more silly, comic-y. And then Nolan's, like you said, are like, these are actually people, and it's not a comic book, it's not a superhero, they're people. And Reeves just feels like a very lateral extension of that, rather than a totally different creation from those three. But then I don't know really where else can you really go, since it's been done so many goddamn times.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I mean, I think that's kind of the beauty of that character. I don't mean to get into like a Batman kind of conversation.
I know.
But it's very easy to when you're talking about the Dark Knight.
Yeah.
I think the beauty of that character is that he is so malleable, and you can do a lot of things with him. You can have, like you said, like the phantasmagoric kind of silliness of the Schumacher stuff, the whimsy of the Burton films, and the more serious stuff. And yeah, I think Reeves, it's the jury is still out just because we only have one movie. It looks like he's leaning more into noir, but I mean, I could be, we'll see when the second one comes out. But yeah, it is interesting how, yeah.
But I do think though that Reeves is somebody that is another person I kind of feel like right now feels little Nolan-esque. Like, he's getting to play in this playground. He's trustworthy with IP material. He's made some remakes of stuff. He's dealt with a lot of bigger properties for most of his career, but there's a lot of character and thought put into his stuff, and a lot of it's practical. And yes, it is. They're dealing with in a darker universe, but they're also they're down to earth and very realistic. But there's also a lot of like for me, The Dark Knight. If we want to start talking about like some of our favorite moments in Nolan films, real quick, one of my favorite moments is in The Dark Knight, and it is Rachel's letter that we hear Maggie Gyllenhaal read out, and then it leads to Bruce being just absolutely torn to pieces, and Alfred having to sort of mop him up to realize that you spat in the face of all these villains and everything, and you didn't think that there was going to be repercussions. And I think that what I love about Reeves's film too is the like that when Batman is trying to help all those people there on the top of the basketball arena or whatnot, and that moment where the person who's being helicoptered out like grabs his arm because she's so afraid of not being there because this person literally protected her and everything. It's those kind of moments in a comic book movie that are very lost in something that's mass produced over at Disney. That I think that it works because you have great filmmakers and storytellers behind these properties, rather than just like, and I'm sorry to say this, but the John Watts of the world, who I don't know has a directorial flair in his body because I've never seen it. You know what I mean? And I know that's trying not to be mean to the guy because he's making like $1 billion movies, but they're empty vessels as opposed to things that you come back to and remember. But that's what I've loved about that film last year, and it was they had the DNA of why Nolan's films resonated, but yet felt very distinct to Reeves' style. Do you guys have favorite moments in his films though? I mean, we talked a lot about his stuff, but Erik, do you have
none?
Nope, you have none of them. Okay, Erik. Well, that's fine.
No, I do. They're all pretty basic. I'm not like,
you're such
going out of my way to be like, oh my God. Except, I mean, I think I have like 5 or 6.
Okay. Go. Let's go.
Even though Tenet is not one of my favorite films of his, I think the highway chase scene is absolutely extraordinary because, again, like I was saying earlier, I love real world things with real action. I know I'm watching real cars driving. I know I'm watching real cars crashing. I know that I'm seeing it because I know, and it just feels more intense. I feel like the stakes are higher. Because something could go wrong, and I think it's one of the better uses of the time rewind that is constantly a part of the movie. But and it reminds me just very briefly of the a much smaller version of the Matrix Reloaded freeway chase scene that just feels like you're just like you can feel it. But the reason I love that scene so much is because it is still the only movie that has ever understood and exploited Elizabeth Debicki's height in a way that was actually beneficial to the story. And her being able to unlock that door and save herself is only because she's 6'1". And I
Good for him.
I love that moment so much because it is a hyper tense moment, but at the same time, that is so tongue in cheek, and it's so funny, and it just, it's my favorite scene in the movie, probably.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe like the initial like bullet thing was pretty fucking cool, but I love that scene.
Yeah. Griff, you got any?
Oh man, I have many. I mean, I think my favorite sequence he's ever orchestrated is probably the ending of The Dark Knight Rises. That just gets me every time. Just the narration, the cross-cutting, the music, the rising. I mean, as like Joseph Gordon-Levitt is like rising up. I don't know, that's really effective for me, especially because those three movies were just such a integral part of my upbringing. Like just seeing it come to an end like that was beautiful. I mean, obviously the ending of Inception is like one of the greatest endings of all time. Also gets me every time. A lot of his endings really are just like, it's just like all you have to do is just say, oh, the ending of this Christopher Nolan movie.
I mean the ending of Dunkirk,
dude.
Particular,
oh my god, yeah.
You know, Hardy final shot on him.
That's on my list. That long shot of that landing is
Well, I was talking
extraordinary.
About even the push
but
in
the
Spitfire.
the whole sequence is
it's
incredible.
Yeah. Also, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I actually really liked that it didn't end on that shot, that it cut to I forget the actor, Fionn Whitehead, I believe, like him like just like shuffling the paper or whatever. Like it was just such a, I know a lot of people were like, oh, it should have ended on the Spitfire, but I was like, no. That little moment right there was key.
If it had, that would absolutely not be Nolan's style, because one thing that he has, which I think sometimes is not always a benefit, but in this case definitely was, is that he's not really sentimental. That's the part of him that's not like Spielberg at all. He doesn't have the same type of earnestness and sentimentality that Spielberg has. So ending it on that wouldn't have felt right for him. So I think that was totally the right choice. I have like a few things, but I have to, if I can pick out one thing from Memento, which anything would be fantastic, it might be the sequence where he's taking he wakes up in the bathroom and taking a shower, doesn't know how he got there because he doesn't know how he fucking gets anywhere. And this guy comes in and he's fighting him naked and what's going on? And then it goes back to the scene before that, running around, and it's his own narration that's really pretty fantastic, and it's so unique and specific to this movie. And it's, oh, now what am I doing? Oh, I'm chasing this guy. No, he's chasing me. That sense of humor and that level of kind of joy in his stuff is what I want to see a little bit more of. That's what I would like to have a little bit more of.
I thought there was a lot of that in Tenet. Like I didn't realize this the first time I saw it, but like watching it with an audience, because they were showing a bunch of Nolan movies, and I saw it last week in a theater with an audience, and like like that movie's funny. Like John David Washington is really funny in that movie, and there's like he's great, but like there's a self-awareness to that film that I don't think I don't think he gets enough credit for it. I mean,
Griff, you're a Bond fan. It feels the story is ripped out of like Roger Moore era Bond. It's so silly and goofy. It's kind of ridiculous.
That's fair.
Yeah, he's like riffing. He's riffing on like the feeling that he had when he was watching like The Spy Who Loved Me for the first time, and he's just like, I know these films. They're in the DNA of my cinema loving body, and so I'm just gonna kind of like play with them. Where it's like,
it's big dumb fun.
Like Dunkirk is like him really like perfectly perfecting that sensory big screen experience. It's like a super precise, very like meticulously orchestrated. Tenet is like, I mean, it literally is just vibes. It's like him just like kind of feeling everything as he's going along with it. And it's,
It's good vibes.
That's kind of what I love. I love to see a filmmaker just kind of like riff on their inspirations like that. And just have fun. And like, I could tell that he had fun doing that. And as a result, like me as an audience member, I'm just eating up everything he's throwing at me in that movie. I mean, speaking of Tenet, the opening of Tenet is probably my favorite opening of any Christopher Nolan movie ever. Like, that is just such a rush.
I think
it is pretty great.
Yeah, I think the opening of Dunkirk and the flyers falling down and not seeing the enemy and having that tenseness throughout. I think, to me, the stuff on the boat with Rylance and Barry Keoghan and Cillian Murphy, when he's like, "Is the boy gonna be all right?" I mean, that shit it hurts.
Yeah.
It's and Mark Rylance is so good in that film, way better than the Oscar that he won, I think, the year before.
Yes,
and
that's a low bar.
And yeah, I know. I love I do love Interstellar. I know that some people are I think that I think there's a lot of sequences. I love the anything with TARS TARS is such an incredible idea of a character and really funny. And I think that in particular, I mean, obviously I know it's memeified to death now, but the McConaughey seeing the messages, it is hard. It's genuinely heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And to me, I mean, yeah, Erik, you're soulless. We get it. But I think also you mix in the docking sequence when they're going off a man's planet, and then you mix that with Hans Zimmer's incredible score. I mean, that score for Interstellar is an all-timer. And especially because I remember the movie in the IMAX and hearing that just that score just like wishing around you as you're seeing they're trying to die. It's incredible. I think that I'm not the biggest fan of Dark Knight Rises, but the opening to that film and seeing that, I it was a really great.
That's on my list.
That was a great appetizer because I saw that sequence in IMAX. We saw that like 6 to 8 months before, and it was partnered with Ghost Protocol.
Yeah,
and so it was it was the perfect appetizer for that Mission Impossible movie.
That was such a treat seeing that sequence. I felt like, I don't know.
Like, can we watch both of these movies back to back? Kind of.
I know, right?
I always think of the with the Prestige. There's the Bowie scene where he's having lunch with Hugh Jackman is such it might be my favorite scene in a Christopher Nolan movie, and talking about man exceeding his grasp and it's so cautionary, because it really also is almost like a thesis for a lot of his films too. And Bowie is so fucking good in that scene. It's an incredible scene. But then also too, what I love about the Prestige is the way you and I kind of wish he would do this more, and I'm hoping that that's what might happen a little bit with Oppenheimer, is how you feel allegiance wise to what essentially is your protagonist. Because at the beginning of that movie, it's suggested that you're going to be mostly rooting for Hugh Jackman, and by the end of the movie, you as an audience have kind of flipped. But then when you really think about it, both of them are just horrible. You're just happy that the pain stopped at what happens with Bale, and how much that and I love their conversations, especially Jackman saying like, you don't know how much I've sacrificed, even though we clearly know what Bale has sacrificed in there. And that ending, to me, I remember seeing that and it kind of just, I mean, you kind of saw it coming a mile away, but you didn't see the way in which it's told. And I think Nolan does a great job with narration, which is a lot of what a lot of filmmakers, you're not supposed to really do in your films, and yet he does it really well. But Michael Caine sort of leading you at, what a trick is, you know what I mean? And establishing what the pledge and the turn and the Prestige are. And then by the end, it tying into Bale and in Jackman's journey. I thought that was really fantastic. And then yeah, of course, like anything with the Heath Ledger and like the 18-wheeler flip, in Chicago. I mean, like stuff like that's when you like knew, oh, okay, this guy's insane, like to do shit like that, but it feels, but like again, watching The Dark Knight and then watching Heat, they're like really great like companion pieces, because then of course he puts in an interrogation scene, which I would say his interrogation scene, while it's not better than the one in Heat, it's as popular in the zeitgeist as that sequence, because of the fact that it's two of the biggest comic book film characters of all time, and probably maybe what a lot of people would consider their best iterations in the best version of a film we have ever seen them in. And I mean, Ledger's performance, again, I know it's kind of weird to say this, but I think we kind of even take it for granted.
We do,
because of the fact that like we're like, yeah, sure, it's great. Then you watch and you're like, shit. There's that scene. I always loved what Kevin Kline said at the Oscars when he was, they did that thing that year in 2008 ceremony where they had past winners come out, and Kevin Kline was explaining the sequence where they've just blown up, the GCPD, and Ledger's got his head out the window, and he's reveling in the madness that he has caused. And I just always think of that shot of Ledger, because it's such a firecracker of a performance, and to think that that's like the last complete performance we got from him was it's incredible. Yeah. And any others? Sorry, didn't mean to hog the space.
No. I mean, it's a great, like, on that same token, I think Tom Hardy's Bane gets pretty overshadowed. I mean, I don't know how you guys feel about him, but
I don't like it.
It's right up there.
Bane?
I don't like his Bane.
You mean Bane?
I've
been here this whole time.
It's good. Like, calm down, Sean Connery.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll have vodka martinis with the end of the world.
Here's the thing. I don't think we get Tom Hardy the like big movie. I mean, I consider
Tom Hardy in
star,
Inception.
Well, Tom Hardy in Inception is great. I mean, everyone in Inception is. I mean, Leo is fantastic in Inception. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, that was like his resurgence.
Honestly, I wish Leo would work with
Where's
him
the
again.
spinoff of Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Tom Hardy where they just fuck the whole time?
Yeah, see, that's
because that was happening.
Yeah, that was
at least in the one that I saw.
A fuck within a fuck within a fuck.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, oh my God, take your pick from Inception. There's so many good sequences in that movie.
I love Inception.
Yeah.
It would be better though if they replaced Marion Cotillard, but other than that,
I think that's true with most things. So,
how dare you?
She's not great in that.
You know who would actually and I swear to God it's not because she's also French, but Léa Seydoux actually would have been really good in that role, I think.
Yeah.
I think Charlize Theron would have been great in that role, and she would have killed it. She would have brought a menacing factor. She would have brought a menacing factor.
I don't know about that.
I prefer Fast and Furious.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I figured so. Fast 10 over any Nolan film for Erik.
Yeah.
For sure.
While we were talking, the Paris premiere of Oppenheimer happened, so the reactions are out if you want to go and take a look at those, which are obviously and predictably very, very good.
They're very high.
They are.
Yeah.
And the highs. I mean, they kind of. Not to say that I kind of expected them to be like this, but I expected them. But I was also kind of surprised that some of the reactions have been that it's a very talky film, and that it's because usually when Nolan has talky films, that means he gets in trouble. But a lot of people are saying that the script is maybe his best in a while, and that the acting's really great. I mean, obviously Murphy's getting standout, but so it looks like Robert Downey Jr. and Matt Damon and Emily Blunt and everybody in this.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's getting a little bit here.
Yeah, but obviously the person getting the most praise is the man that we've been talking about here. So, expectations, I guess, going forward. I mean, expectations for Oppenheimer, if you got them. But Erik, you kind of talked about like what you would love to see him do. But is there something that you'd like to see Christopher Nolan do maybe in the future? Maybe like a type of film that for him to make?
No, I mean, like I said, it's not really for me to say. It's just for me to either enjoy or not. That's just not my job to say what he should do.
Okay. What a fun answer for a podcast. Thanks.
I do.
I mean,
no,
he's right. He's right. Yeah.
I already said what I said, though, that
I
would enjoy a bit of a return to some slightly minimalist filmmaking, but even though Oppenheimer is 70 millimeter IMAX and all these things, just even having black and white sequences is going to feel like following a little bit, just a tiny bit. I think there will be like nooks and crannies where we will find his previous films kind of all in this. It feels like that to me. That's sort of my expectation, is that this is not quite Dunkirk, but like a step up, and I mean a step up not in quality but just in taking real stories and giving them his treatment. I just think he's really successful in that. So I that's my anticipation for this, and just what I would like to see.
Griffin?
Kind of going off of what Erik said, I think I think with Christopher Nolan, I don't have any expectations or like wants that he outside of doing a James Bond movie just because I know he is a super fan. That would be cool to see. But also, I got Tenet. I got Tenet. So it's like, that's his like weird vibey James Bond movie. And if he never did anything like that again, I'm cool with that. That's fine. We have that movie. But like, I just want whatever he feels is the best story for him to tell next. I'm going to be there for it. He's earned, my trust in him. I mean, I never really thought I'm a big history guy. So like, I would go see Oppenheimer and be interested in it, but I never thought I would be like this excited for a movie about Oppenheimer, and yet here we are, and I'm like, about to jump out of my chair just to go see this thing. So that's really a testament to it. And from like the early reactions, it sounds like he's kind of used this as a vehicle to dabble in horror a little bit, which I think is something that a lot of people have wanted to see from him, and I think that's something that he's kind of loosely expressed interest in doing, like a horror movie. So I mean that's pretty cool with me. But yeah, I mean, look, yeah, like Bond would be cool, but also if he got to make like 5 more Tenet sequels, dude, I'm all there for it. Like let that be his thing. Like there's so much they could do with those characters in that world, and I'd love to see more Tenet movies.
I have to say that I for Oppenheimer, I'm kind of expecting it to just be good. Trying to keep my expectations tempered because Erik knows. I'm trying. I mean,
this feels like a fib.
I mean, this movie is completely in my wheelhouse. It really is, because it's a director that I love. They're making a essentially a passion project that they, $100 million, a big scale, lots of great actors. Anyone that decides to work with Van Hoytema right now is great in my book.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
His collaborations with Ludwig Göransson, last go round were great.
Wait,
so oh yeah.
I was gonna say, going off the Hoyt thing really quick. Do you ever just like when you're watching some of those older Nolan films, do you ever miss his collaborations with Wally Pfister? Because
Wally Pfister doesn't exist animore because
I know,
he made
he's
Transcendence, and it was not a transcendent experience for him. You know what I mean?
He's been bullied out of the industry.
I mean, like, think about like you're doing really great work and he wins an Oscar, right? Didn't he win an Oscar?
I actually I don't know if he did.
For Inception. Didn't he win for Inception? I believe. Oh, Wally Pfister. Maybe somebody could look that up. We all have Google.
Isn't Erik the encyclopedia?
Shouldn't you know this, Erik?
He's AwardsWatch.
But my brain is also like a sieve, and my retention for information is actually terrifying. Yes, he did win
for Inception. All right, cool. So and then you're like, oh, I'm gonna make my own thing, and then the guy moves on from you and starts working with maybe his better collaborations, at least aesthetically looking. So it is a movie, and also too, I think of obviously the Lawrence of Arabia comparison. That's one of his favorite films of all time.
Yeah.
I also think too, the way he's going to very much examine this entire era and do a big examination. It feels, because he's such a big Michael Mann fan, it could feel close to something like, if he dabbles in that deep, to The Insider, which is another movie he really loves from Mann's filmography. And I got to tell you, The Insider is maybe my favorite Michael Mann movie. And so, it's all building up to Ryan's, it's in the bag. So I get it. And we're all in the bag for certain movies and certain types of movies for sure. But going forward, I honestly think that Nolan is best when he's doing adaptations. You look at The Prestige, you look at the Dark Knight, you look at supposedly what's going on here with Oppenheimer coming out. Even Dunkirk was built off of a lot of historical documents and things of that nature. Those are my top 3 films from him. And so I think that adaptations are the best way for him, because I do think he gets in his own way a little bit with either explaining or under explaining things. And I'm okay with that. I don't think that he's necessarily a bad writer when it comes with it, but I do think that it gets in the way of some of the momentum. Like when I rewatched Inception, a movie I still like, I lost some of the momentum because he's explaining a lot of things there, and I didn't feel it nearly as much as Interstellar, because I think the emotion and the aesthetics really work better. But obviously, there's still a lot of
I'm totally the opposite on that.
Yeah,
but yes, that was my point at the beginning is I feel that's exactly kind of what's happened, is that he really kind of kicked off the time manipulation and mind fuckery with Memento and did it through narration as the explanation pretty successfully and extremely economically. And with the bigger things, when he does that, it becomes something that I feel sometimes gets away from him a little bit.
With all that said, though,
also the nature of sci-fi, just in general, when you have to create your rules and the world that you live in, and if you break your own rules, you've kind of lost the thread.
Yeah. With that said, I want him to make Heat 2.
It's a book, actually,
and
I'd be into that.
I
also think he doesn't like I said, being really deliberate. He makes things too with, regardless of the time period or if it's fantasy, it has to do with anything that's happening right now. And looking at the comments about Oppenheimer, it clearly is also that. The feeling of absolute impending doom, which is what anybody in the world has felt like for the last 5 years.
Well, and then also too, impending doom within your own industry as well, and and the craft that you're behind too. I mean, he's, there's a lot of people that think Inception is a movie about movies when you really break it down.
So are we saying The Bomb is Warner Brothers Discovery, or
I mean streaming platforms?
He built them up.
No, for sure. But no, I whatever he makes, I mean, it will obviously be one of the most anticipated films of the year, along with many other directors. But I don't know. I mean, I have to say this, and I know I'm always biased when it comes to it, but I always love to see even though I kind of feel like, I guess you're getting a little bit of that bias when they're out in the middle of nowhere, but a Nolan Western wouldn't be out of something to ask him, like a pure Western, because I always love when directors jump into that genre. I mean, or like, it doesn't even have to be just a straight Western. I mean, like, I love movies like what looks like Killers of the Flower Moon, which is you could kind of call that a Western, or you can call There Will Be Blood a Western if you wanted to, or No Country for Old Men, or some movies that are kind of set out in that sort of era, but they also deal with a lot of ambiguity. And I think also too, like the Western kind of fits him in the stories he's kind of telling, the kind of complex characters. So I would be really fascinating to see if he ever did one of those. But
I think if they hadn't done a Westworld series, he could do
he didn't do
a Westworld.
Yeah, he would have done. Yeah, that would have probably been really great. Yeah,
well, I mean, his brother was the showrunner.
I know.
Series, though.
That's why it's so funny.
Yeah, but it wasn't good. Because
I'm like, you're
hey,
the first 2 seasons were outstanding. So.
No, those first 2 seasons are trash. That's all.
You're
trash.
absolutely wrong.
Excuse me?
Garbage.
No.
Yeah, they're really great at the beginning, and then they fall apart. House of Cards. You know what I mean? So.
Anyways.
Yeah, that's your whole like.
I'm proud. Right, okay, I'll be proud to say that Westworld isn't good. I'm not going to get obliterated online for it.
Probably.
Yeah,
obliterated?
Yeah, I'm not gonna.
You're just creating words like Sarah Palin now.
Yeah. Fuck you. Fuck you.
He is Sarah Palin.
You have the hairline just like her. Anyway. All right. Anything else you want to say about Nolan?
No. Are we gonna rank?
You want to rank real quick? Yeah, Erik, did you rank?
Aren't we stanking and ranking? Yeah, we're ranking.
Griff, why don't you go ahead, rank yours from least favorite to favorite?
All righty. This is gonna be controversial. I actually just updated this, so get ready.
Following number 1.
No, following number 11. I not because it's a bad movie, but
it's the one no one goes back to. It's a good placeholder.
Yeah. Insomnia number 10. Here's where it starts to get a little dicey. Memento number 9. Interstellar number 8. The Prestige number 7. I have the Dark Knight trilogy just kind of as one conglomerate. Right now my ranking is Batman Begins, Dark Knight Rises, Dark Knight. Sometimes the Dark Knight Rises takes over, sometimes Dark Knight. It's just one entity, so that's taking up 4, 5, and 6 right there. Number 3 is Tenet, courtesy of a new rewatch because I just fucking love that movie. This is where it gets a little interesting. Number 2 is Inception, and then number 1 is Dunkirk. I think Dunkirk is the best film he's ever made, but my favorite movie of all time is Inception. So that there's kind of the caveat there. So, yeah.
Wow.
I know.
Yeah.
Erik?
I don't know how I feel about I don't know how I feel about that.
Well, why don't you tell us what your list is, Erik?
Okay. My 11 is Insomnia.
Yeah.
My 10 is Following. 9 is Interstellar. 8 is The Dark Knight Rises. 7 is Tenet. 6 is Dunkirk. 5 is The Dark Knight. 4 is Inception. 3 is Batman Begins. The Prestige is number 2, and Memento is number 1.
He's a big.
Sorry, Griffin.
I'm stunned by the Dunkirk placement. That's honestly
I kept kind of moving it around because I do really love it. I think it's great. And it is like to date, I think and it's funny that this was his best director Oscar nomination because he eschewed the sci-fi and the fantasy long enough for them to finally recognize him. And it's not lost on, I don't think, anybody that it sort of felt like that. But no, I love Dunkirk. I think Dunkirk is great, even though he did kind of also foist Harry Styles on us. So
he did. Yeah, but then we don't get the spit meme if not for Dunkirk.
I know, but I think he might be to blame.
Yeah.
I love Harry Styles. I'm just teasing. So,
but Harry Styles is good in Dunkirk. That's the difference.
That's
the example of people trying to taking the wrong lessons from Christopher Nolan.
Yeah,
he knew how to cast Harry Styles.
It's the appropriate use and time use of a pop star, I think is where that went. But Yeah, Memento's probably always going to be number one. My heart is always going to be with that movie as my discovery of him, and just how raw it is and funny, and how fucking good Guy Pearce is. I miss Guy Pearce as like who was going to like be the actor.
He was going to be the guy in Hollywood.
Man, it just did not happen.
Yeah.
No, poor guy.
I know.
Poor guy.
Happens. Anyway, here's the real ranking, folks. All right.
Wow.
Jesus.
Because I've watched all these films in the last 2 months. So I'm
so the recency factor is going to completely bend it, is what you're saying.
I mean, yeah, because I just saw them all. You know, and they're great. Number 11 is Following. It deserves to be there. 10, Dark Knight Rises. Again, I give it a pass, but it's just Marion Cotillard again.
Hathaway's great. Cotillard is fucking ridiculous.
I think also it forgets to be a Batman movie, and it's a real goddamn shame, and also too. I know. Sorry, Griff. The Joseph Gordon-Levitt of it all just really kind of ruins it too.
I love him.
Yeah, right.
I love him too. He's one of my favorite parts of it.
No. Anyway, number 9 is Insomnia. That is the least Christopher Nolan movie on this entire list. Nobody's talked about how that's essentially a director for hire. It feels
that's why it's 11 for me.
It doesn't
matter.
It doesn't matter. The good thing about it is like the performances carry it, but like it's not his script. It just doesn't feel like it has any of his directorial vision behind it.
I will say the mountain range shot that I think he kind of echoed in Interstellar. That you know what I'm talking about, with where the plane's coming into Alaska.
Oh, okay.
And it's like that feels very Nolan-esque. But
I think I think the
agree.
only sequence that like I was like, oh, that's kind of Nolan-y is like the fog sequence, and that's like in the original or whatever. It's nothing.
Also,
you know what I mean?
like insane that Nolan worked with Al Pacino and like no one talked. Like it's just a weird sort.
Yeah,
of,
nobody talks about it.
Yeah,
right?
That's another reason why it's such a weird thing. It's like it was, English language remake, 3 Oscar winners, and it had the fake prestige factor.
Yeah,
but it was all fake.
Yeah.
There's nothing to it.
Yeah. 8 is Memento.
God, you guys suck.
It's where it deserves to be. He got better as a director. I get that it helps Sundance and all that other shit, but whatever. Number 7, Inception. The mechanics and the over explaining of the shit really just got to me on this new go around. Number 6, Batman Begins. It's a great movie. 5 is Tenet. Those temporal pincer movements. I remember seeing that in the IMAX. I can hear the movie just fine. I understand it. I understood it when I first saw it. I understand it now. It's great. Robert Pattinson's hair. He looks, his outfits look just like Christopher Nolan.
I love Robert Pattinson so much.
The carrier sequence, all of it. John David Washington, fantastic. Aaron Taylor Johnson also too.
My God, it's such a good bit part. Well, not a bit part, but it's such a good part.
Well, it's also just a hot cast. I mean, good God.
The
movie would probably be my number 1 if we took Kenneth Branagh out and replaced him with a better actor. But whatever.
Branagh is terrible. But I mean, if Nolan does a James Bond movie, Aaron Taylor Johnson's right there.
Exactly.
Right there.
Number 4 is Interstellar. I love that movie. It broke me the second time, or the latest time I watched it. I just I know that people have problems with that movie, but I think that's the closest I think he's been to being sentimental.
Oh my God, it's
having his emotions on his sleeve, and being a father of daughters, and so I
did you really just say that?
Yeah, he's a dad. He's
the father of a daughter.
His girl. Yeah, and he always talks about going to the cinema with his girls and Emma, his wife, and so and they all, and like I remember in that director conversation, them making fun of him, talking about how they all went to see Phantom Thread, and they for like weeks couldn't stop calling Christopher Nolan Mr. Woodcock around the house, because he's like that character in that movie, and so I thought that was really really funny.
Okay,
but yeah, it felt very
Ryan,
sentimental.
You know how absolutely like sobby I can get at movies.
Yeah.
Why did I not connect with Interstellar, which should have absolutely done that?
I think it will now.
Should I rewatch it?
Yeah, I think you should. I think it's also, yeah, I think it didn't make me cry when I first saw it. To be fair, I was just blown away by the presentation of it. But now it's, yeah, I think it's a movie that's aged better than people give it credit for. And yes, it does. I think at the time, weirdly enough, like the Hathaway dialogue and the over explanations, people I felt like after The Dark Knight Rises, and I feel like they took a lot of the problems that they never talked about with Dark Knight Rises, and they put a lot of those on Interstellar. I mean, I think it's a very sentimental but very mature film. It's got a lot of Kubrick influences. I think it's got a lot of Spielberg influences in it too.
Yeah.
Especially stuff like Close Encounters and whatnot. But it's
literally a movie about a father finding that love is like the answer. Like that's the only thing that matters. Like it's a movie. It's
a little hokey, and I mean, like Matt Damon's character is named Dr. Mann, and Mann is like literally like the worst thing in the world. But like everybody's got like shit like this in a movie where it's like dumb as fuck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I think people, the thing with Interstellar, the last thing I'll say is the thing with Interstellar is people got so caught up in the science of it all. They were like trying to I just remember like people like
movie
trying to dissect and be like, oh, this is actually how that black hole was. And I'm like, okay.
Yes, but that's Nolan's fault. I think that's Nolan's fault. If he had not gone and made it very snake eating its tail so that was a preoccupation, then I think the emotional content would be enough to kind of carry people through, but it became a distraction for me. So I think that might be why some people have like split on how they feel about it, because they are trying to overanalyze the science versus fiction and all of that. But that's on Nolan.
Well, you said it was the science and the fiction, right? It's science fiction, meaning that it's not real. So who gives a shit? Just watch a movie anyway. So number 3, Dunkirk. That one actually moved up. I was really surprised that one did. And I just hadn't seen it since the theaters. That got me more because it, that movie is really by the end of it is. He's filming one. It's the better of the Dunkirk movies than that it came out in its given year, Darkest Hour. But two, but two also it is again another having your emotions on your sleeve. This is for one of the biggest moments in the country's history, especially in the moment of peril. And I don't know, it like for me watching it, I was feeling like, man, we don't have acts of pure, kindness and patriotism like this anymore. And, literally going on and doing a very selfless act. And I think that, I think it's also just like really, it might be his best direction, and I that he's ever done. And I think that I'm very happy that he got nominated for Best Director, because there's so many goddamn shots in that movie that they are breathtaking.
Yeah.
Number 2 is The Dark Knight. Kind of speaks for itself. And then number 1 is The Prestige. I think that's his best film. I think it's the best script he's ever worked on. I think that it's the best he's got of an ensemble. His direction is sneakily great in that movie. He sticks the landing. Again, working on an adaptation, so he can take that anywhere he wants. Genuinely great surprise. And it's also it's a mean movie. It is a mean movie, and I like that.
No, it is. Yeah.
Because it's about these fucking terrible people, and he makes you give a shit for them for the duration of a 2.5-hour runtime. So, Bale's great. Jackman never better. Like I said, even good ScarJo performance. Michael Caine,
his actual Greatest Showman performance.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yep.
So
yeah,
all right.
he's phenomenal in it.
Yeah,
I love that movie.
All right, that's our rankings. That's Nolan talk. We're done. Griffin Schiller, thank you for coming on, my friend. Can you tell us all where we can find your work on the internet?
Yeah, you can head on over to the FilmSpeak channel on YouTube. I just put out a video on Dial of Destiny. I'm like the only person who really loved it. So if you want to hear a different opinion from the masses, then go check that out. Also, I will also be in the, I'm quite literally in the 1% of people that did not like MI7. So you can have that to look forward to as well. But yeah, if you want to check out all my work, it's all on the FilmSpeak channel on YouTube. If you want to follow me on, God, I would have just said Twitter, but now it's like Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky. It's all just at Griff Schiller.
All right, Erik Anderson, where can we find you and all your work, sir?
Yes, at AwardsWatch.com and on Twitter at awards_watch. Everywhere else, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, etc. AwardsWatch.
All right. And you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and any other socials I guess I create in the future at Ryan McQuade 77. You can find me here at awardswatch.com, FilmSpeak, sometimes over there at FilmSpeak playlist. Also, while you're at it, when you're on the website, go and sign up for our newsletter where you can get all the great work that's over at awardswatch.com sent to you in a nice, wonderful, concise email twice a week. And maybe
can't miss it. There's like 35 ads on the site.
You can't
just
miss
click
it at
one
all.
of them.
Just click it, please. Please click it.
Oh Lord.
This coming weekend we will be talking about Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 and our top 5 Tom Cruise films, and we'll also later in this week you will be hearing the first episode of Director Watch, so look forward to hearing about that. That's where me and myself and Jay Ledbetter will be reviewing the films of Todd Haynes. And that first film is, of course, in that series going to be Safe. So thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you all next time.